I wonder if you like stories. Now, when Jesus was a little boy, there were no storybooks for children. Most ordinary people couldn't read, and so storytelling was very important. Jewish mums and dads would tell their children the stories that were passed down by grandfathers since God first made the world. Jesus told lots of stories to anyone who would listen. He used his stories to teach people important things. Sometimes he was even called the teacher. He became famous for his storytelling, and people used to flock to hear him. Now, it worried Jesus that people might go away without really understanding what he was telling them. So he usually took the trouble to explain the meaning of the stories. Now, some of you children in Ash class before half term were learning about a man called Aesop, who was also a storyteller. And Aesop used a similar technique in his stories. Can you remember what Aesop's meaning was called? The moral of the story. Well, let's see how Jesus did it today. Let's open the book to the Bible story called A Tale of Two Houses and see if you can work out what Jesus is telling us.
Two men decided to build a house, one each. They looked around at God's beautiful land to find the best spot. The houses needed to be near water and fertile ground so that the men and their families could grow crops and vegetables and graze their cattle and sheep. Both men thought it would also be good to have a really beautiful view, so that when the day's work was done, they could sit outside, relaxing with their wives, and enjoy all that God had provided for them. The men, let's call this one Farid, and let's call this one Simeon, each set off to find the right spot to build his house. Farid quickly found what he was looking for, a good view near the water, and collected his tools and set to work. Simeon poked and prodded, ummed and ahed, but he too found a place he thought was just perfect for a house. So they set to work. Farid worked quickly, had the walls half up before Simeon had made his first clay brick. All Simeon had done was to dig a big, shallow pit.
Get a wiggle on, mate,
said Farid as summer approached.
At this rate, your roof won't be on by autumn.
Simeon said nothing. He stared at Farid's house and went back to work on his pit. As he worked, he prayed.
Help me to do this right, Lord. You know the best way to build a strong house and the best way to live a life. I will trust in you always.
Get a wiggle on, mate,
said Farid as autumn approached.
My roof's nearly finished. Your wall's only a metre high. You'll never be ready when the cold strikes.
Simeon said nothing. He stared at Farid's house and went back to work on his wall. As he worked, he prayed.
Help me to do this right, Lord. You know the best way to build a house and the best way to live a life. I will trust in you always.
Get a wiggle on, mate,
said Farid as winter approached.
Bit late for roofing now. My house is finished. We're moving in tomorrow. Snug as a bug in a rug. You'll never be ready for winter.
Simeon said nothing. He stared at Farid's house and went back to work on his roof. As he worked, he prayed.
Help me to do this right, Lord. You know the best way to build a house and the best way to live a life. I will trust in you always.
Simeon finished his house just before the winter storm started. Torrential rains began and winds blew, and soon the river rose. On and on it went for days and days. Simon was glad he'd taken such care with the foundations of his house. He'd made sure he found a place of land with good rocky base. He made his clay bricks and built slowly and carefully, making sure everything was watertight. He trusted in God to show him the best way both to build his life and to live his life. Simon peered out of his small window just in time to see Farid's house give its first wobble. The ground it was built on seemed to be disappearing into the river. He stared at Farid's house as it swayed and lurched and fell to pieces with a loud crash. And all that was left was a heap of mush on the sliding sand near the riverbank. Sensible Simon was like the people who listened to Jesus and built their lives on what he told them. Foolish Farid was like one those who didn't.
Well, did you manage to work out the meaning? I'm sure you did. Sensible Simeon was like the person who listens to the wise words of Jesus and trusts them. That person builds a good, strong life for themselves, just like a good, strong house.
Let's close our eyes for a moment. If building a good life means listening to wise words, whose words are we going to listen to? And whose words will we ignore? Now, I'm going to say a prayer, and if you want to make it your prayer, say Amen at the end after me. Dear God, help us to listen to those who have wise words to share, and help us to ignore silly ideas. Amen. Thanks everybody for listening to our story. We hope you enjoyed it, and we look forward to seeing you again soon. Bye bye.